So there's so much to cover, but I think the best way to start this whole conversation, and not to kind of denigrate back on kind of what we talked about, because I think the buildup has been how do you create change to all these problems. And I will tell you, I don't think that I will be able to provide you the solutions to create, or the solutions for you to go out and execute these solutions. I am not the all-seeing, neither is anyone in this room, no one in the legislature or across Mississippi. I don't think there's any one person that has all the solutions for you to go and ask, what's the solution, and to take that back and execute it. That is not, I don't think that's what this is about. It's just execution of orders. So I think the best way to start this is asking the question, what is your why? Now Forrest is he's gonna be like he's back at AFP, because AFP, Americans for Prosperity, we are built around a system called principle-based management. It was a very successful business practice started. It was originally called market-based management systems by the founder of our organization, and used in the private sector to take a company from a good amount in the 60s to the largest private sector company in the world. And all that started with very simple, easy questions. And I think one of the first questions that is asked when you think about how to actually make change, how to actually create problem-solving solutions, and to actually begin to start the process of creating change, you have to start with why. So is anybody familiar with Simon Sinek? So if you go online, there's a video you have to watch. It's Simon Sinek, and it's what is your why? Or he talks about, Simon Sinek is a very professional development guy, someone that works with businesses and communications folks, and he is one of those top tier guys that is continuously changing the game when it comes to asking the right questions. And when you think about a company and the way that companies operate, everybody says how and what, like how are we going to do this and what are we going to do? How are we going to create a product? How are we going to sell the product? How are we going to do the most incredible, wonderful things with our product? And what are we going to sell? How are we going to do that? But at the end of the day, you can ask those questions all day long, but if you don't go back to the reason why you sell the product, the reason why, and I'm not doing a great job illustrating what Simon Sinek does, but I think what we have to do is form a foundation for each of you to stand on to create your own change, to create change in your community. And I'll tell you what my why is. Growing up, I am from Philadelphia, Mississippi. I grew up in a unique home, not unique, but like a home where I was in a single parent family. I grew up living in a single wide trailer out in Pisgah, Mississippi. Moved slowly down Highway 25, trying to find better education outcomes by just moving to the next public school and trying to legally not go to jail, because they will throw you in jail if you try to cross county lines and mess with their monopoly system of where you should go to school. So growing up in this environment, I grew up, like I said, kind of unique. I have family members who are very different than I am, very different ideas. I was brought up by a mom who marched against my uncle, and with my uncle on one side being in the Ku Klux Klan, being a grand dragon in the movement, and my mother on the other side being like, how can you sit in a church pew behind me and profess the views of Jesus Christ, but then you go out and say that other people are better than you, or other people are beneath you and you are better than them? How can you do that? I was given this basis of my why, of recognizing my faith, recognizing human dignity, recognizing like when I woke up on a mattress in my single wide trailer out in Pisgah, I was given a task that day to wake up, go to school, just try to become a little bit better. And so when I think about it, when I think about my why, My why is the full encapsulation of my life, of dealing with poverty, dealing with an absent father in my life, dealing with the questions of religion, dealing with the questions of religion and politics in my life, and dealing with these very intense situations of our history as Mississippians. And all this culminated into who I am today. I'm a Bible-believing Christian who will never leave the state of Mississippi, who I love this state more than anything in this world. I truly believe each Mississippian and each person outside of Mississippi, despite them not being as blessed to be born and live here, despite what people might think about their misconceptions of Mississippi, my why has become to make every single day count, to help a child achieve better than what they have been given in life and what they've been told they can achieve. I was told by my teachers, you're best to probably be a welder, or you're probably best to be a school teacher. And there's nothing wrong with those professions. If that's what you want to do, that's great. But I went from being, like I said, someone who was told I will not be anything really higher, to someone that has sat with congressmen and that sat with senators, sat with elected officials. And that does not make me unique in this, but for someone in my skill set, Forrest, when I first came to AFP 5 years ago, Forrest will tell you, I was terrible at grammar. I could not write an email to save my life. I did not have the skills and the tools to even get those meetings and to be in these places and to present in front of you. And it was because, there were some failures. There were failures of the public school. There were failures on the part of personal responsibility of myself. But at the end of the day, I had the ultimate opportunity to sit with great people and to really dig into my why and say, I'm going to stand up and I'm going to change Mississippi for each child that was like me, for each person that was created, designed by God, uniquely with individual talents and gifts. And we're going to make sure that they have the ability to access quality education, no matter where they live or what their financial situation is. We're going to find a way to create better outcomes in healthcare. We're going to find a way to create better outcomes. And we talked about, how do we stop the welfare system? The only way you stop the welfare system is by telling people that are stuck on the farm of the federal government, that are the slaves of the system, saying, over here, there's something much better. If you say, I have a better idea, because that's the problem is when you talk to people from the right and the left, and you say, I have a better idea, I have a better place that you can be, they don't think it's real. They don't think it's possible. But I think if you were actually able to create within someone the ability to imagine them creating a business. I was the first person to go to college. I'm the first person to own a house before the age of 30. I was the first person to make my amount of money. Me and my mom make the same amount of money. And it's not doing much with the economy we have, but there's so many mile markers that I've hit because I didn't just sit back and say, I'm going to do the same old thing. I'm going to accept that I'm just a poor dumb kid from Mississippi who can't do anything. That's the wrong idea. So, all this to say, build your why. Understand why you're doing what you're doing. And I don't care if you stay in Mississippi. I hope you do, because we need smart, inquisitive, beautiful minds like yourselves to really make Mississippi the best place to live, work, and raise a family. And I think once we can build the foundation of that why, we can start working into the 4 key institutions of government, or the 4 key institutions of our society. Working in business, working in community, working in education, working in government. Those 4 pieces, with the pillars of society, are leaned on, and people of strong constitution are there and holding those up, we can see change. And also, if we take the 5 principles of human progress, and I can give these to you after I get finished, but at the end, make sure, yeah, we're good. Dignity, recognizing the human dignity of every person. If we recognize individual rights, we can recognize each person has value, they have the ability to contribute to society, that truly can create the catalyst to make sure that every person, no matter if they're a welder, no matter if they're opening a catering company, no matter if they're building rockets for NASA or SpaceX preferably, I guess, or whatever, teacher, professor, whatever it is, that we recognize that each person has something to contribute. Number 2, openness. This is the hard one for me a lot of times. That uncle that I literally do not agree with. I do not agree with any of his stances on the Jewish community, on the black community, on whatever. But I will say, I will sit down and hear him. Because at the end of the day, if I can hear him, I can say, I just don't agree with you, and this is the reason why. But I think he respects me more for hearing him. And I think anyone, Marxist, Leninist, people who hate me, call me a racist, call me a bigot, call me a person who supports the 1%ers or whatever, a dirty capitalist. I love when people call me a dirty capitalist. But at the end of the day, I still believe having an open mind, having people contribute their ideas, can make our society better. And I know I'm taking a while to set this foundation, but I think these are important. Number 3, bottom up. This takes openness to the next level. I don't think government in D.C. or government in Jackson can truly say a community has a problem of lack of health care. And they don't go into that community, they don't ask the questions, they don't find out what the reasons are, why health care is not accessible. Is it really more of an economics issue? Is it more of a, is it the certificate of need laws that we talked about? Is it, a lack of nurse practitioners? Whenever you try to give someone in power the ability to just play God, that's not how it works. You have to have bottom-up solutions. You have to have people from that community who understand it. I will never trust anyone who comes to me that lives in New York and tells me they know the best fried chicken in the world, or they know the best thing for Mississippi, or they know the best thing for how to, I grew up in a farming community, how to raise chickens or how to do this or do that. When it comes to Mississippi culture, Mississippi heritage, Mississippi problems, and the way things happen. Now, I will listen, but that doesn't mean that I believe they're right, because I think the person closest to the problem is probably the one who probably has one of the better solutions. Sometimes that's not the case, but it can be. Number 4, mutual benefit. Mutual benefit is going back to that free trade, going back to that free exchange of ideas. When we enter into an agreement, if it is one size where I am forcing you to do something, that is not going to be a healthy relationship. Every relationship must be that being able to work together, being able to exchange freely services and goods to build a better, more transparent society. So, hey, I need a cup. If I get a cup, and so if Annika gives me a cup, she's helping a speaker that's helping her out and making sure I don't fall over because I'm thirsty. But also, I'm getting a cup from her, and I'm getting a drink of water from her. I don't actually need water. Okay. Good. But at the end of the day, there's this exchange where I'm continuing my service that I offer, but then they're giving me something to keep me going. And it gets much more complicated than that. But at the end of the day, markets work. Free markets are the best markets, and we must continue that on. So, continuing on, finally, the final one before I move into the legislative process and planning. Self-actualization. Big buzzword. Everybody talks about self-actualization these days, but it's literally, in my understanding, it is the culmination of everything that you've experienced in life, the openness, the mutual benefit agreements, the bottom-up solutions. It's everything that you've taken into your life, and you've created, and you've learned of yourself a place where you can go out and actually start executing on the ideas that you've gained, and actually take the ideas that are swirling around your head, because I don't know if y'all are like me, but I go to sleep at night going, how can I create mobile emergency care that doesn't require, health care, like a major medical hospital to be right there? And it's like, that's just one crazy idea that bumps around in my head because I know there's a problem. And the self-actualization says, oh my goodness, I'm a human, I'm smart enough to figure something out. I've researched enough, I've talked to enough people, I have enough friends in the healthcare field to maybe figure out a solution. Maybe if we exchange some ideas and then took everybody together, maybe we can find a solution to one of the hardest problems we have, which is, like I said in my example, emergency care in rural communities. Because I like rural communities, because I like to shoot guns, and I like to be out in the middle of nowhere, and I want to have a cabin where nobody talks to me half the time. So that's my rant to start off, just to start the basis. If you have those things to start off with, everything beyond this point becomes more realistic, more attainable, more possible. So, what's the first step to creating legislative change? Write out your plan. We had a system at AFP that took, I think me and Forrest and a former state director sat there for 3 days trying to write out this plan. Because what you do is you take all your inputs, all your little pieces here and there, you put them together. You're taking your actions, if you're trying to talk about healthcare, you're talking about speaking engagements, you're talking about radio ads, you're talking about all of the individual little items that you need to create kind of a change model. You are looking at your outputs, how things are coming out, and how are those actions actually applying, and how are those actions actually making a change. And then you're going to outcomes. And all your outcomes are, you're actually usually working backwards. You're usually saying, hey, I've taken this knowledge, I've done my research. I've researched the problem, I know the problem, I've talked to people in the problem, I understand what the problem is. I've researched policy solutions, possibly for me, I work in healthcare a lot. My why in healthcare, my mom has multiple sclerosis. We've been in and out of the healthcare system for years. It's expensive. My mom's had to do incredible things to try to pay for her healthcare system. And so when I came to AFP, someone finally was like, hey, let's talk about ways to reduce the cost of healthcare and possibly get your mom better healthcare in the community that she's in. Well, I didn't realize that there were certificate of need laws that stood in the way of new hospitals, new machinery, new 19 different areas in Mississippi that are covered under CIN laws that make a person that wants to spend their own money. Investors gave them money and said, Mississippi has a lack of health care. I'm going to give you X amount of dollars to go in and open up a hospital. Well, you go before this board, and the board says, well, there's already an MRI machine less than 2 miles away. I don't think we need your services. Even though that would have reduced the cost of the MRI, that would have meant that if there is a wait time for the MRIs, then there would have been an MRI available probably sooner. And then on top of that, you have all these other policy solutions that start to fall in line. Nurse practitioner availability. You have telehealth. You have doctor-owned hospitals. You have so many different areas that you can research in healthcare to formulate policy solutions. And if you're leaning on your why and your principles, you're never going back and saying, well, I think the best solution is just to start handing out money to just random people to start setting up clinics. Taking from someone else, taking someone else's wealth, and creating something that isn't financially viable. You have to have the market in place to move and to make this work. So from that, you do have to consider external factors in this. So you have to find out who your opposition is. So if you're working in educational freedom, I'm not going to say their names, but certain teachers unions and organizations that say they're for parents, but really they're for teachers. And you have these groups that are saying like, hey, we're going to fight you tooth and nail. So if you're going to make policy change, you write your plan, you rely on your principles, you start to understand the policy and the solutions, you start to build that, and in that, you have to learn who's going to fight you. Because if nobody fights you on an issue, either you're on the other side of glory and you are in heaven, or you are something's not right. Somebody's supposed to stab you in the back because you're doing something wrong. So, or maybe I'm just a cynic, where I just don't think there's. I think there's always going to be opposition to good ideas. Another one, healthcare. I fight the hospitals quite a bit because, as was mentioned earlier, with CON laws, certificate of need laws, there's a ton of resources. I know Douglas is working on some stuff. Our organization is working on some stuff around certificate of need laws. Hospitals hate us because they don't want to compete. They don't want to actually take the hard conversations of what is their model doing and how's their model working, and saying, let's actually sit down and think what could be a better solution than having more like we have more rural hospitals than California. It's crazy to me that we have more rural hospitals in California when the population difference is ridiculous. And I know there's some factors that factor into that. But at the end of the day, you have to know your enemies. Also, you have to know your budget. If you're working on an issue, money will always be a factor at some level. I'm not saying you have to pay a lobbyist, but I'm saying having money to go out and talk to people, even the gas to travel to talk to people. The cost of the computer for you to do live streams on. There's always a cost that you have to take into account when you're trying to figure out how to create a plan. Hope I'm not missing any other things, but who's your coalition partners? We work with Empower, we work with Mississippi Center, we work with, in my healthcare coalition, we have Institute for Justice, we have Concerned Veterans for America, we have our national branch. Working on. We have a lobbyist that comes down, and then we are adding several other groups to kind of come in and be a part of our coalition. So you have to take into account when you're who's going to be inside your coalition, trustworthy factors, and all that. So I know I'm running short on time, so I got to get to the legislative process. So how does a bill become law, and how does Okay, let's be honest. How does a bill actually become law? That's the key question here. Not how does a bill become law on the idea of like the process is pretty straightforward, but I will convey to you today probably the best ways that bills become laws. So, first, how do you get a bill? If you're on more of the side of the think tanks and nonprofits and stuff like that, generally going to have another person or yourself who is an expert in the policy field take the language of the required change. So let's say CON. So the required change is removing the language that requires certificate of need for the 19 different areas that are covered under certificate of need laws. That's your bill. Now, once you get into the legislative process, you're going to have the ideas of, well, maybe you want to split the bill up. Maybe you want to have the bill, maybe you want to have some people push the bill over here while you have another bill coming in. It can get complicated. But your first step, if you're working on a bill, get bill language. In the legislative process, you have the bill drafting attorneys over at the legislature. Once you get a legislator on board, they're kind of on with your idea, they can take that and have it drafted by the legislative attorneys to actually get a bill together. I'll get into slightly at the end legality and like constitutionality of like bills, but at the end of the day, the first step, get your bill written and have some sort of idea of what you're going to be pushing, because in our legislative process, if you get halfway through and there's a procedural issue in your bill where it can literally, somebody can just say there's a point of order on this bill and it goes against the rules of the House or the Senate, that bill can die right there. So you have to do your forework. You have to do the work beforehand and lean on people like Forrest, who, last year or 2 years ago when we were working on the bill on sandboxes, ag sandboxes. It was a very complicated piece of policy, but at the end of the day, the problem was it was just like the rules of the House and the Senate were just not going to allow the bill to go through without some major changes. And I couldn't make those changes without the bill being a little wonky in the end. So at the end of the day, our Commission of Agriculture was just really good. We really didn't need to deal with it at that point. So moving on. So I've kind of talked about a sponsor. So what are you talking about with sponsors? So when you're working with the legislature, you want to make your friends. You want to find the people in there who are aligned with you and your beliefs. Now, that's not saying that it has to be 100% aligned. I don't think you'll ever find anybody in the legislature that's 100% aligned with you. It's great if they are, but most likely you're going to have some differences. So you have to learn how to work with people despite having differences in the end. Some of the best legislators over there, we could sit down and have a great conversation, and we might agree on one thing, and I'm happy when we agree on that one thing. But there is an understanding that we will probably be against each other at some point in time. But at the end of the day, when you've got your bill, you're finding a sponsor for it, or when you're trying to find some other people to bring along with you, because you don't want to just have one legislator beside you. The legislature of Mississippi is 174 members. There's 122 in the House, 52 in the Senate. The makeup in Mississippi is roughly 70, right now, before the election, was 77 Republicans, 40 Democrats, 3 independents, and 2 vacants. In the Senate, it was 36 Republicans, 16 Democrats. AFP is a nonprofit, as a nonpartisan organization. We don't care which side of the aisle you're on. If you're working on good policy, we believe in the Frederick Douglass quote, we work with anyone to do good and no one to do harm. As long as that is the line, I'm willing to work with anyone. I don't care which party you're from, because I can sit down with black legislators in the Delta who have very different life experience than I do. And they are also Democrat, and I'm on the other side on the right. If I sit down and say, hey, certificate of need laws limit the amount of dialysis clinics in the state of Mississippi. A large majority of your constituents are affected by this. What can you, are you willing to partner with me on this? We've actually had some very proactive conversations because dialysis is a requirement for life. So some people actually really, you can find those commitments. So once you got the bill-sponsored bill, everything, it's introduced. This is where things start to get a little fast and heavy, and really, it can get really out of control really quickly. Once it's introduced, it's going to be assigned to a committee by the leadership. So who are the leadership? I'll go ahead and breach this subject. Who are the leadership? I want to actually answer this. Who are the leadership in the House and the Senate?
Your Lieutenant Governor in the Senate, and you've got your Speaker of the House, you've got Bill Gunn, you've got Douglas House.
Correct. And one of the things that we, cool, that worked. So with that comes, you have Speaker Gunn, who is over the House, who will sign the bill to a House committee. Or if it's in the Senate, you'll have the President of the Senate, which happens to be the Lieutenant Governor, the most powerful position in the state of Mississippi that you will have, talk. Those are your main players when deciding where a bill goes and how a bill continues. Once it gets to a committee, you're going to have committees start to duke it out, and you're going to have the idea kind of put on trial at the beginning. Once that committee says, hey, we're okay with this, or if they vote against it, then the bill dies before. And there's a lot of deadlines. I won't kind of get into it. But at the end of the day, committee is your first test, really, of where it's going to go and how it's going to do. So if it gets past a committee, let's just say it's a fictional bill coming out of the committee of the House, let's say public health. If it gets past public health, it'll go to the floor for a vote. Once it's voted on by the floor, if there's going to be discussion back and forth, hopefully it passes, it'll transfer to the Senate. Once it's in the Senate, it'll go through another committee process. Hopefully it makes it through that. Once it makes it through that, it'll go to another floor vote. Once the floor vote is finished, if there's a complete understanding on the bill, then the bill will continue on if it's voted on to be signed. But if there's changes, it has to go back to make sure the other chamber is okay with those changes. If they're not, it'll go to something called conference weekend. It's a wild weekend of just trying to understand. It's essentially 3 members. It's 3 members, right? 3 members from each chamber come together to try to decide how the bill is going to work out. Now things do get a little changing when you do have a bill coming from both directions, but sometimes it's best for the bill to go to. So last 2 points, and I know I'm going to wrap up. So the governor signs it, or if it goes to the governor's desk, the governor has 3 options. He can sign it, he can veto it, or he can punt it. If the governor decides not to sign a bill, which is very possible if the governor doesn't agree with it, but if it goes back to the legislature and it gets overridden, his veto gets overridden, it's probably best for him just not to sign it. And if that's the case, then it'll become law. So obviously, veto, it dies unless the legislature overrides the veto. If he signs it, great, the bill becomes law. Final piece, I've always remembered this. Forrest told me this a few years ago. No bill is unconstitutional until it is ruled unconstitutional. So no matter if your bill, again, the Dobbs case. Dobbs case, a lot of people said for a long time, we don't need to worry about this because it's unconstitutional at the federal level. Well, that got overturned. So don't ever let constitutional challenges limit you in your thinking what is possible. So I think that's the best place. I think there's a whole other piece that if y'all want to talk more, I'm free and open. I work with AFP. My name's Cade Yates. Thank you.